Welcome to the Plugged In Golf Podcast. I'm Matt Saturnis. In this episode, I'm going to be talking with Chris Finn, somebody who I've gone way too long without talking to. He is a golf fitness expert, a great listen, and he is going to break down a lot of myths around golf fitness and just give you some really concrete ideas for some things you can do, especially if you're in the off season, to swing faster and swing safer also in the new year. That's a big thing Chris is focused on, and I think it's a thing that really comes through in our interview. That so many people are afraid of speed training because they're worried about injury. And his system, his home mobility assessment, which he provides for free, you can find out about that in the podcast. Uh, those are things that will take care of those concerns because he's not going to let you swing faster than your body is able to. So it's a great listen, something I really hope you hang around for. Before I get to that, I want to let you know that this week's episode is brought to you by ShotScope. ShotScope, of course, another great thing to do for your game if you want to score better. I am always a big advocate of shot tracking. I always have my V5 right here that I use anytime I play because there's just things you're going to learn about your game that you don't know now. I know there are people who will say they know their game. I always insist that until you see the amount of data that ShotScope provides, you have no idea what you're missing out on. The level of granularity that you can get in this data to understand where you're strong and weak in every aspect of your game is really unmatched. So you can find reviews of all the different ShotScope products on the website, or you can go over to shotscope.com to buy them. The last thing I want to talk about before we get into the interview with Chris is I got a question from a frequent listener and emailer, and he said he just came up on his golf birthday or anniversary. He just came to the game kind of late. He's just been playing for about a year now, and he wants to know how to celebrate his golfing anniversary. And I think that's a great idea. I like that idea of having a golf birthday. I think a lot of us have been playing for so long, we don't know exactly when we started, but people who are later to the game may have that date etched in their mind. If you don't have it, maybe you just pick a day, and that's going to be your golf birthday from now on. Obviously, the way you celebrate that may have something to do with your budget. For some people, it might be, I'm going to go to Bandon Dunes on my birthday. That's obviously very expensive. But I think anybody could probably swing. I'm going to play a little better course than I normally do. I'm going to play the one course in town that I don't regularly play because it's a little expensive. I think that would be a great way to celebrate your golf birthday. Um, Tying back to some of my tropes, maybe every golf birthday you go and check in with your fitter. Maybe you get on a launch monitor and see where are your numbers at and how's your game progressing, or how are you doing against Father Time. I think those might be great ideas as well. Um, if you wrong side, if you like collecting golf stuff, like all my silly head covers back here, maybe your golf birthday, you buy a golf head cover every birthday for yourself, or any kind of collectible, something to mark the occasion would be cool. So those are just a few ideas. Hopefully, uh, something in there resonates. But I'm gonna stop talking now. I'm gonna make some space for Chris Finn. Again, if you're interested in golf fitness, you want to swing faster, safer, play longer, this is just a fantastic interview. We're now joined on the Plugged In Golf podcast by Chris Finn, the CEO and founder of Power Force Success. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure, Matt. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So it's been over 4 years since you were on the pod. So let's just start with a recap for all the people who've joined the listening audience in that time. What first got you interested in golf fitness?
Yeah, so it's funny. I started over 10 years ago, and when I first got interested into it, it was honestly because I didn't think it would work. I thought it was kind of silly, some of the stuff I was seeing. This would have been like 2010 Arena from a time perspective, and just some of the stuff out there was just didn't make any sense relative to other sport performance side of things. And at that time, I was a physical therapist and a strength coach, and I got it. I got the golf bug myself, and
Mhm.
decided, let me see if there actually is something to it. And so I just started kind of collecting data on everybody that I started working with, and seeing if what I was doing was actually working. And defining that as, does it actually make them swing the club faster? Does it actually make them rotate more? And fast forward a decade, and now we've got a database of over 15,000 golfers from a physical database standpoint, and it's been a fun ride, just kind of the last decade. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, you're selling yourself a little short. I mean, 2010, unfortunately, time is going fast. That's 14 years. I mean, that's well over a decade now. What have you seen change in the golf business in that time?
a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's funny when I joke with the guys that that work with me now, and they're funny when they're working with golfers and trying to convince them to to work with them, right? And they're like, it's so hard to convince people to like get out of their own way. And I'm like, dude, like at least they know what the heck golf fitness is. Like when I
Yeah.
started, like, what are you doing? And it was like, so not only did I have to tell them what the heck I was doing, but then I had to convince them that I could help them. And so I think one of the big changes that's occurred has been that the general public knows what fitness for golf is. It's much more accepted. You see, like, if you don't do fitness on the tour, like you're weird, whereas
Right.
that wasn't the case back then.
Yeah.
Um, Getting more popular, so with Tiger coming out in 2000, and like it was definitely catching traction. But I think that's probably the biggest thing has been the mass adoption of it in a way. I think what also has come with that, though, on the that would be the upside. The downside,
Uh-huh.
I would say, all the stuff you see on social, like there's so much like just junk out there of
Yeah.
people like just doing things and calling it golf fitness or saying it will help. And so what was nice is while people had no idea what the heck I did when I started, they didn't come to me with like, hey, I've seen 5 different things. Which one do you think were like there was none of that. So that kind of, I didn't know that was cool. That was a blessing at that point, but it was.
Right.
But now, nowadays it's people know what it is, and they get information from everywhere. YouTube, magazines, all that. And so there's definitely more of an awareness, but with that comes more sifting through the crap, I guess, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a kind of a collaborator on the site here who's a golf instructor, and he said that one of the golf instructor's jobs is being a traffic cop for all the data.
Yeah.
Maybe data is a little too strong, but all the stuff, all the noise, and that's probably a big part of your job now too, is because there is so much noise out there that you've got to be the one telling people, don't do that, just stick with this.
Well, yeah, and I think that's honestly been the genesis of pretty much all of our research that we've done has been, it started, I guess probably 2017, 2018, looking at like speed training devices. It's now going into, different resistance devices and
Mm,
line training versus in-person training, and this mobility thing versus that mobility thing. Uh, and that's really everything that we look at is if we're going to study it. I think that's the big issue as the traffic cop, as you put it. Uh, like a lot of people call stuff in the marketing world, they call it research. So, hey, look at the research we did, and
hmm.
it's a study of like one person, which is called
Right.
a study, which isn't actually research.
Yeah.
But there's these big claims that are made. We've seen this on the golf side for decades, right? Where it's like, oh, Tiger does this move, so therefore everybody should do this move,
Right.
right?
Right.
Starting to see that in the fitness space where it's like, oh, look, John did this and he's swinging 10 miles an hour faster, so therefore everybody should do what John did, right? And it's kind of having to educate people and be like, look, like based on where your demographic, how old you are, what your mobility numbers are, how strong you are, like you're actually the total opposite of John, and actually you doing that is going to hurt you, and you
Right.
actually need to do, instead of X, you need to do Y, right? So that has definitely been a big flip. Something that was not the case. There was no traffic copying in golf fitness in 2010,
Yeah.
but definitely is much more of that now for sure.
Yeah. Well, to that point, a couple things I want to talk about that you do at Power for Success that I think are fantastic. One is the home mobility assessment, which I just think is such a powerful thing. You're on version 3.0 now. Can you talk about what that is and how it's changed from 1 to 2 to 3?
Yeah, so it started with, I think I was TPI certified back in probably 2010, and so if anyone's done it, like a TPI screening, there's like 16 different screenings. There's tons of testing that you do physically. Coming from the medical world, there's tons of medical screening that you do as well. And I quickly learned that if the first time you meet somebody, you do 16 or 20 different things, like it's just, in one ear, out the other, totally over their head. Like literally I would finish an assessment, and for a 2-hour assessment, and maybe 10 minutes of it was like looking at the swing and what their body's doing. And literally the only thing the person would remember was the swing. And it was like, well, what the heck was the first hour, 50 minutes for?
Yeah.
So really what we started to do is I started to say, what are like if I could boil this down to like 3, 4, 5 things that like are really matter, that actually move the needle, what would they be? And so that's where we started doing all the research, and we found that really like 80% of what I would call like injury risk is basically could be identified if somebody doesn't have the ability to rotate in their neck, in their shoulders, in their spine, or in their hips.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't have that capability, then like the likelihood that they get hurt is going to go way up, right? And then it was like, all right, well, that's cool from a mobility standpoint. What about strength? And that's where we did a bunch of research. We found there's really only 2 power tests that have a direct, what's called a causational relationship to club head speed, which basically means if you do this, then speed will go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's vertical leap and upper body, like a chest pass, like upper body. And so when we really boiled it down, those 6 tests, the 4 mobility rotational tests, and then the 2 power tests, really were all that, that's going to, for the most part, handle 90% of the solution for 98% of golfers. So it was like, it was a very clean way in a concise way for people in less than 5 minutes, literally do these 4 mobility tests, and we're going to know if you're at risk or not for injury or whatever it may be. And lo and behold, the more we did it, we started to find out like, hey, if you're over the age of 40, like over 90% of people are going to fail like at least one of the tests, right? So then it became a very powerful kind of like, I don't know, problem aware, or like a wake up people to be like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be able to move my hip that way. Yeah, like wild, but yeah. Then it opens up that conversation with the person to be like, oh, is that why I hang back or I stand up out of posture, or right? And so it made a really direct connection there. So that's kind of where it started. And it was like literally it was a PDF, and like take it, and then you had to like call us so we could tell you what it all meant, because it was too much to put in a PDF. And really what it's evolved to now is it's an online, like people can go online, you can take it. There's a video that shows you how to do the test, and immediately will tell you, hey, this is how you ended up. This is, this is where you're at. Mm-hmm. And from there, like now I can like, in talking about it now, it's like, hey, like literally in less than 5 minutes, you'll know where you stand and like what you need to do, what you need to work on. And then the 3.0, the next evolution has been being able to give people like a swing speed predictor, where, and not like, I think I want to clarify here because there's 2 things. There's a lot of people say, hey, based on your numbers, you can swing this fast, right? Mm-hmm. Which cool. I think the more important number that people miss is based on this number on these tests, this is how fast you can swing safely. And unfortunately, people, they chase that other number, the former, and then they get hurt, right? So, I mean, we all know somebody who's tried speed training. Maybe if you're listening, maybe it's been you, and you bust your elbow or you hurt your back, or like, and it's because over 90% of people don't have the requisite mobility to swing as fast as they're already swinging. And then B, they don't have the strength to support as fast as they're swinging. So now I was joking, you can't put speed on, you can't build crap on crap. Like if you put speed on top of more speedy crap, right? It's not good. Yeah. And what ends up happening now when people go to the test, they're going to say, hey, I pass, I fail these areas. So now, oh, okay, I have an issue of mobility in these areas or not. I have a strength area of deficit relative. And the cool thing is it's all compared to people their age, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're a 52-year-old guy, you can compare, hey, how do other 52-year-old guys, what do they look like? Am I average? Am I better than average? Right. But then you can see for my age, like I'm good or bad in those areas. And then because of how I performed on those tests, this is what my max safe swing speed is. And I always joke, I had a guy's host on a radio show, and he took the test, and he was a former PGA player, and he he's swinging like, I think he was swinging 106, 107 miles an hour in his late 50s. And we're on the show, and he's like, yeah, I took the test, and like it told me like my safe swing speed is like 92, and I'm swinging 106. And I said, oh my God, like, well, that's not very good, dude. And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, back always hurts whenever I play. Like, I hate playing golf. It's like, well, no, duh. Like, that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
it's that's a common experience a lot of people have had. It's kind of that light bulb moment of, oh my gosh, like my back hurts or something's not going the way I want it to, and here's the reason why. And I think
Right.
that's been we've been able to give people a clearer and clearer picture of where they are, and then also deliver them like the why in much quicker and more, I'd say more applicable fashion, right? Where it's not just, hey, if you're between 50 and 60, it's not like, hey, at 52. And the other cool piece of it is we can say, hey, if you're swinging 100 miles an hour and you want to swing 110,
Mm-hmm.
well, here's what the guys who swing, this is what they look like. And these are the metrics that we would need to get you to swing 110. And so I think that's really cool in terms of it giving people a very clear pathway of reaching their goals wherever they want to go, whatever they may be.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And the safety thing is so big because obviously you hear this all the time. Like, well, I don't want to do speed training because I think I'll get hurt. So when you can tell them, here's all our research, you're this age, you ought to be able to move like this to swing that fast. I think that's really pretty powerful. I'm curious, is there a most common point of failure, even like across ages? Is there one particular point in the chain that really is commonly locked up for people?
Yeah, across the board, the hip rotation is by far and away the worst. I have fun whenever like go to a presentation or just talk to somebody. This is actually hilarious. I was at the Sartori at LA Country Club last week, and we finished first round, and I'm sitting at a table like on the lawn with 10 guys, and they're all like 45, 50s plus, right? And one of the guys, and like as we're sitting there, a guy comes off the course, and he's like holding his back, like the dude was in rough shape. Like
Yeah.
he's like, dude, we're out of the tournament. He can't even swing the golf club. So apparently his back went out. So he sits down, and lo and behold, what always happens is these circles of people find out what I do, and so then everybody's, oh well, can you fix his back? So I said, well, so I made a bet with the guy. So I bet you $100. I'm going to show him one test, and I bet you $100 he fails.
Yeah.
No, 100%. He's super flexible. I was like, no, I'll bet you
Uh-huh.
$100. So he sits down. He goes, moves his hip, literally. So if people listening, if you guys can think about this, if you're sitting in a chair with your feet flat on the ground, knees 90 degrees, right? So kind of just sitting in a chair. If you don't move your knee and all you do is keep your knee bent and just kind of rotate your foot out to the side, so your shin, if you're looking straight on, almost looks like it's like a hand on a clock, right? And it would kind of go out to the, from 6 o'clock out to 3 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
And so you're supposed to get about 45 degrees. So if you think of a clock at 6 o'clock is foot on the ground, 3 o'clock would be 90 degrees. You're supposed to get about halfway there.
Sure.
Maybe 10 degrees. I mean, literally from 6 to like maybe one tick on the clock over, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't move. His hip starts cramping. He's leaning. And I'm like, so I collected $100 on that bet. But
Nice.
the
Nice.
fun part was then after that, all 10 guys are like sitting around this table outside trying. Literally every single one of them fails, and it's fun at this point because we have such a big database where you just know literally 9 out of every 10 guys are gonna struggle with that test.
Yeah.
The good news, bad news of it is the good news is it's like the true like cause, I would say, of pretty much 90% of the issues in the golf swing for most guys. Like for instance, if you're a right-handed player, your lead hip not being able to rotate is the number one predictor of low back pain. So as a right-handed player, your left hip not rotating is a problem. As a left-handed player, your right hip not rotating is a problem. So if you have back pain and you feel like that, and 53% of golfers have back pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the single most common thing that you see.
Yeah.
Right? So the number one reason why people can't get through the ball or compress the ball or they come up with all these compensations because they can't rotate to their lead side. So the hip by far and away is the most like problematic, but it's also very simple to fix once you know that it's a problem in terms of if you know what to do about it. And
Sure. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yes, and that's the beauty of it. It's not hard to fix.
Yeah. So on that point of kind of longevity and some older players, you talk about longevity training explicitly on your site, which is not something that I've seen too frequently. What is it and how is it different than what you would do with younger players?
So it actually isn't any different. I think it's
Okay.
actually, man, I think it's just been an evolution the longer I've done this. And when I started, I thought, hey, everyone wants speed, everybody wants performance, right? And you'll get and guys come in, they're like, I want to swing the club faster. And then you're like, well, why? And then they're like, well, because my buddy's hitting it longer than me. And you're
Hmm.
like, well, why is that important? And he's like, because I don't like being short. And I'm like, well, what would happen if you lost another 20 yards? And like, I just stopped playing.
Yeah.
Like, cool. So this isn't actually about distance. This is about the game not being fun anymore. And if we don't get you the distance, you're not going to keep playing. That's what I'm hearing. And he's like, well, yeah. Right. So I think that's when you start talking about it in that fashion,
Hmm.
way more meaningful for guys. And they're much more likely to engage in it and like stick with it. And, it's just the difference is longevity changes. When you're 80 years old, those guys just want to play for like, they just want to keep playing until like beyond when they don't want Father Time to tell them to stop. They want to keep
Right.
going, right? Longevity for that guy. The guy who's 60 years old and retires, he's been working his entire life grinding. Longevity for him is he wants to play in retirement.
Right.
You keep backwards, you get the guy who's played in college. Longevity for him is making the tour,
Hmm.
right? The tour, it's keeping their card. Yeah, if you go even further back, you go to juniors. Their goal is longevity for them is to keep playing in college, right? So the goals, the goal of continuing to play the game at a level enjoyable never goes away and never changes. I think when you talk about how does the training change, well, in order to play on the PGA Tour, you've got to swing a heck of a lot faster than you do when you're trying to play at the age of 80, right? Now,
Sure.
the requirements of needing to rotate and have power in your lower upper body, those don't change. But you don't need to swing 115 miles an hour to be average at 80. You swing 115 at 80, you're an anomaly.
Yeah. Yeah.
The physical requirements change based on where you're at in your golf journey. But truly, what every golfer is looking for in some way, shape, or form is longevity. Like if your back hurts, you ain't playing. Like,
Right.
please get rid of my back pain so I can go play more golf, so I can enjoy the game, right? So I can continue to play with my kids or whatever it may be. And so I think when we look at longevity, the reason that we talk about that is ultimately what we have found is that's what really matters to people. And it comes in different flavors of getting out of pain or picking up distance or, just wanting to take their buddy's money. There's different flavors of it, but at the end of the day, everybody's looking to just play this game as long as possible at whatever level is enjoyable for them.
Sure. Sure. Well, in the spirit of being a good traffic cop, I've got a bunch of questions or topics that I'd love to throw out to you, and you just, give me your feedback, thoughts, ideas, things you've researched, etc. Um, one that I'm really curious about because I have kind of my opinion on this is probably a little stronger than it should be, given that's not my area of expertise, but I'll throw it out and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. What's your view on static stretching before a round of golf?
It's a good question. It's an age-old question.
Yep.
It is. I think my view on it is it depends what your goal is, right?
Okay.
So the easiest place to start is just in the science of it. And the science of generally when people want to do a static stretch, we'll just use like touching your toes, right? To
Hmm.
stretch. The general idea is I'm going to try to touch my toes before I play to stretch my hamstrings to loosen up so I don't get hurt. That's generally the belief, right? So I think if you dive into the science of it, when you hold a static stretch, generally 30 seconds is kind of what people will do at most. What ends up happening is there's little fibers. They're kind of like caterpillars or like millipedes, right? They have like a bunch of little legs. And the
Hmm.
way that I'm shorten is we grab more of the legs, and when they lengthen, more of the legs let go. So when you're stretching a muscle, essentially what you do is lengthen the muscle, right? The idea is my hamstring is 6 inches. It needs to be 8 inches so I don't get hurt. So you bend
Right.
down, you hold it for 30 seconds. Ultimately, what happens is if you think of your car and you have your RPMs, right? And you get up to 7,000 RPMs, and there's the red line, right? Your body naturally, when you're cold and you go to touch your toes, it stops you at the red line. It doesn't let you go any further.
Hmm.
Hold that for 30 seconds. It lets you go a little bit. Maybe instead of stopping you at 6,000 RPMs, it lets you go into the 7,000. So you get a little bit in the red zone.
Hmm.
mentally, perceptually, we think, oh, I gained flexibility. Well, in reality, your muscle is as long as 9,000 RPMs. Your brain just let you get to 7. So
Okay.
you didn't lengthen the muscle. You just went closer to the end of where your muscle actually is.
Okay.
If you look at the science of muscle lengthening, you have to hold a stretch for a minimum of 5 minutes to see any sort of lengthening at the actual tissue level.
Hmm.
Any gains that you're getting prior to that truly are like just, I don't call them brain tricks, but it's your brain is letting you go a little bit further and access a little bit more. So that would be the first. The second part is stretching before the round. You think, why would I do that? I think because I don't want to get hurt. Well, if you stretch before, if you remember all the feet I was talking about on the
Mm-hmm.
millipedes, right? The more feet you have over each other, the more feet can grab, the harder the contraction,
Mm-hmm.
aka stronger the contraction, aka the more force you produce, aka the more club head speed you produce, assuming you hit its center face, aka more ball speed you produce, which means it goes farther. I think you guys get where I'm going with this. If you stretch, you now actually decrease the number of millipedes, quote unquote, that are over each other. So you actually will decrease what's called your max voluntary contraction, or you decrease your ability to produce a maximal contraction. And if you
Mm-hmm.
actually start to see an increased injury risk. Now that's getting extreme, but I mean, there's been studies where they look at if you do static stretching before you swing, or if you do like what's called myofascial or tissue work, you're rolling on a cross ball or a foam roll or a softball.
Yeah.
There actually will be an increase in power doing the tissue work, a decrease in power, club head speed, from the stretch.
Hmm.
So knowing all of that, I tend to say if you like it and it makes you feel good, you can certainly go ahead and do it, but it's certainly not helping your performance. There's other areas that I would recommend that you would look to do that would give you the same result of feeling looser,
Mm-hmm.
but actually in a way that maintain all of the quote unquote millipede feet on each other so that you can still have a good contractile force.
Okay. And why don't we just pay that off? What would be something real quick that somebody could do before a round that would feel good but actually be beneficial?
Yeah, 100%. So the thing I always think of it as like your tissue is like silly putty,
Mm-hmm.
right? So put silly putty or like you always have played with Play-Doh. If you put that in the freezer, like it's not real stretchy, right?
Right.
And that's what anybody who's gone out and played to play in like 40-degree weather like knows what that feels like.
Sure.
Compare going out and playing in 90-degree weather, you feel like the length of time you need to warm up is incredibly lower, right? So now if you instead you took that silly putty, you put it in the microwave, what you do is increase the temperature of that silly putty, and now it's more stretchy, right? So the warmer tissue is, the warmer muscles are, the more stretchy they are. So you truly, like they call it a warm up. That's literally what you want to do is warm up. And so the best ways to warm up, prior to playing are actually they're called like dynamic, the fancy words. If anyone listening wants to be fancy to their friends, dynamic multi-segmental movements. For us simple-minded people like myself, I prefer like a squat or a lunge, like
Mm-hmm.
do that move multiple joints or body parts at once, right? So big movements. So you can do like a squat with a lunge with a rotation, right? So you can, easy one would be if you're holding a golf club out in front of you, like a cross in both hands, horizontal to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You lunge out with your left leg, with your left knee, you go down, and then you rotate over your left leg that's out in front, right? So you're bending your ankle, knee, your hip, you're rotating your upper body and your torso. Like you're getting multiple different joints moving. So we actually have on our YouTube page, people can just type in like pre-round warm-up. There's, I believe, a couple 5 or 6 minute ones there. They're free. Anyone can check those out. Those give you some ideas of stuff to do. So that would be what I would call like the like level 1. Like you show up late, you got 2 minutes to just try to get warmed up. That's what I would do while you're hitting
Yeah.
balls. If you want to be like above average and you want to really excel, then you would do stuff with like a softball or a lacrosse ball or a foam roll, where you'd actually take those tools or like a Theragun and actually massage into the hip musculature and the shoulder musculature in particular, because your shoulder and your hip joint are where most of your rotation come from.
Mm.
So it would make common sense. I should probably warm those tissues up the most, and the
Yeah.
warmer are, the more rotation I'll get from those areas. So So those would be I guess the payoff of, instead of static stretching, those would be the alternatives that you could, insert that would actually act. And when they do studies, you actually will hit it farther, which
Great.
is kind
That's the goal, right?
of on top.
What is the most common mistake you see people making when they're quote unquote exercising for golf, when they're trying to do golf fitness?
Man, just one, huh?
Yeah, if you want to throw a few in there, that's fine. Everybody can get one.
At just a high level, Matt, I would say the number one thing I see people doing is that they are in the gym and doing something without ever having assessed what the heck they need to do. Right. And that's the genesis of the home assessment, is like, at least guys, like, least I can do for you is give you a free idea of what the heck to do. Like,
Hmm.
at least let's have some sort of an idea of what area you want to need to work on. Maybe it's mobility, strength, whatever it is. So I would say, just at a high level, that's the absolute number one thing that people do wrong. I would say now the second thing would be people who do go to the gym. Like, that's great that you're going. I'd say the second thing people do is they don't change up what they're doing based on results.
Mm.
Um, I literally had a phone call with a guy yesterday. And I'm talking to him on the phone, like, "Hey, what are you currently doing?" He's calling because he's losing speed, right? I'm like, "Dude, what are you currently doing?" So I go to a stretch lady. I have a trainer that I go see. And I'm like, "Cool, that's great, dude. Like, how many times how long you been doing that?" "I've been doing it for 5 years. I've been seeing these people." I'm like, "Cool. How many miles an hour have you lost?" He's like, "I've lost like 2 club length." I'm like, "Great. Well, let's see how well your hip moves." His hip moves like a degree, like 10 degrees.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, "So he failed like 3 of the 4 tests." I'm like, "Cool. So
Ooh.
you the 4 tests." I was like, "How much?" So you see it for every week, twice a week. You see, or so 2 with the trainer, 1 with the stretch person. So 3 times a week. So that's what, 150 times a year, let's say, right?
Yeah.
I was like, so that's, and you for an hour, so it's 150 hours. You've been doing it for 5 hours at like 600 something hours. And how much do you pay an hour? Like, I'm
Oh.
like, so I go there, so I'm like, "And you're getting worse." He's like, "Yeah, but they're great. And I love them." And I'm like, "Dude, like, I like, no, like, stop." And that's an extreme example.
Yeah.
And to illustrate for people, those of you who go to the gym and do the same 10 machines, or do the whatever exercise routine you're doing, and you're not testing before I always tell, here we always minimum every quarter, so every 90 days you test, see where you're at, test your club head speed. I mean, literally, if you guys wanted to run your own par for success testing at home for free, like, test your club head speed every 90 days, and also do the home assessment. And so that's going to test your lower body power, your upper body power, and your 4 rotary centers, along with your club head speed.
Hmm.
If those go the wrong direction, something's not, like, whatever you're doing isn't paying off.
Yeah.
Like, change. And so I would say that's probably the most common thing I see in the gym. There's not, obviously there's lots of funny exercises you see people do, and you're like, "Dude, that makes no sense at all." But
Right.
I think the thing that I think will hopefully help the most listeners possible is that most people don't know if what they're doing is actually working. And
Mm.
there's like blanket assumption that, hey, doing something's better than doing nothing, which it is. But if you're gonna do something, like Jesus, man, like, let's but let's at least get something for it, you know?
There's a really interesting piece of psychology there. It's one of my favorite things. How people There was a study about this actually. We don't The specifics don't matter, but where people would actually pay, they went and took a medical test, and then they would pay to not get the results. It's like they feel so good about putting in the time, like your guy with 3 times a week. He felt so good about that that he didn't want to be deflated and find out, oh yeah, I'm getting slower and less flexible and weaker. That's really interesting. Um, I want to hit on a couple more, and then I don't want to take up all your whole day here. If you were to say, you know, I'm a big believer in specificity. I think you should train toward what you want to do. If you had to say one way or the other, do you think people who are doing golf fitness are getting too cute with the specificity or not being specific enough?
Great question. And I think the big thing people who are doing with golf fitness try to get too specific, right? And I think part of it may just be a confusion of terms that people have, right? So people think, hey, I'm going to do sport specific training. Well,
Mm-hmm.
sport specific training can only occur in the sport of golf if you have a golf club in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
A golf ball. That's what sport specific is, right?
Yeah.
Really, you're doing like movement specific training is actually more what like golf fitness would be.
Okay.
In case then you should be looking at what are the movements that are actually necessary and contributory to playing good golf, right? And so that's where you look at hip mobility, shoulder mobility. You look at lower body, like vertical peak power, right, which is a fancy word for squatting, hinging, like your ability to kind of jump and push
Mm-hmm.
into the ground. And then upper body push power, which would be like a bench press, a chest pass. And there's some, without getting too into the weeds, pulls are important too. So like a lat pull or a pull up or
Yeah.
stuff like that. I think you see a lot of people doing a lot of like med ball rotating. You see a lot of people doing like swinging PVC pipes
Mm-hmm.
or back and forth, right? And if the reason you're doing that is to train a specific movement, like with heavy battle ropes, right? And you're trying to do that because you're trying to feel your hips moving first. Cool. No problem with that. That's actually a good tool to use for that. If you're doing medicine ball throws for, sequencing feels or trying to increase a specific ground force based on the drill you're doing, like make tons of sense. Tested that. I think where a lot of people get in trouble, they try to get cute with the med ball throws, and they're doing like 20 med ball throws against a wall, and they think they're working on their speed. And they're like, well, no, your sequence actually is totally off.
Mm-hmm.
Speed work, you certainly don't do more than 5.
Right.
Not, and the med ball is way too heavy for like your golf club. How many grams is that? 300
Right.
something? 6-pound medicine ball? Like,
Yeah.
nope. Like, so, but again, it just goes to people. I think just they're not educated on like, and they see stuff on social or and it's very easy. Like in my early in my career, I mean, dude, the number of times I could get somebody on a Bosu ball, and like think of a Bosu ball as like the
Yeah.
half ball with air in it, and you got the flat black part on top. Right, I'd flip it over so they'd stand on the black part. And I'd do this when I was like being like a physio, right? And I'd be like, all right, we're gonna stand on one leg, and we're gonna rotate with a club around our shoulders to work on our hip stability and our ability to rotate. And like, you can sell that so well to a golfer.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. It's like, yeah, if you can do it on one leg, you can totally do it on two. And then you start looking at the research, and you're like, well, actually, you're totally changing how they're interacting with the ground. And in actuality, it's more of an ankle, like proprioceptive. Like, you're actually training them to do nothing that is like the golf swing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you get a lot of that, and you can make it make sense to somebody.
Sure.
So yeah, to basically to sum it all up, like I do think people get too cute, and in reality, they just need to like lift heavy things.
Oh,
Relative.
I was gonna bring it there myself and say that I was being a meathead, but you did it for me. I love that so much because look at what your test is. Like you said, a chest pass, bench press, a jump, a squat. Like get strong. Stop dicking around with like you said, flamingo turns and oh I got bands. Man, get strong, throw some weight around, and then we can and of course stay flexible, but then we'll worry about all this specific stuff, but like you're just weak. That's why you can't swing it fast.
It's like why you're not stable in your left hip is because you can't squat your body weight. Like,
Yeah.
thought. But the cool thing is just to piggyback on what you said, like we know what the numbers are, right? So for squatting, or let's start with deadlifting. For deadlifting, once a golfer gets to 1.75 times body weight, so if somebody weighs 200 pounds, right, and they can, I'm going to use easy math. So they weigh deadlift 175 pounds. So that would be if they're 200, that'd be what, 350. That's strong enough. Like
Mm-hmm.
at that stronger, diminished point of return.
Mm-hmm.
And it's football, for instance, they always talk about like 2x body weight. For golf, it's actually less, so it's 1.5. Squatting is 1.5 times body weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds, if you can squat 300 pounds for one rep, you're good, right? And then bench press is about 1.25 times body weight. Like, and once you get to those points, like just maintain. Like then you don't have to be in the weight room that much. Like just literally go once a week, and if you need to work, and then that to me is if you want to get cute with your training, that's when you can get into force velocity curves. And do you create your speed because you're like you have strength speed, or are you speed strength? Like are you somebody like a Akshay Patia, like Raleigh guy here, like skinny, and he is not a strength speed guy. Like he's gonna not have a career in a couple of years if he doesn't get stronger. Like his back is right. Have other end of the spectrum, like in Ernie or John Rahm, right? Like these guys are strong, right?
Mm.
Rory is a guy who was naturally more speed strength, and he's put on a lot of strength. So he's worked on training that other side of the continuum, which is important as we get older, because the elasticity that we have actually decreases as we get older,
Yeah.
right? For golfer in your 50s, you probably need to do more elasticity. We have guys doing bounces, plyos, and speed improvements because they're strong enough. But now we just work on their elasticity abilities, right? To me, that's where the cuteness should be getting and occurring.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're doing flamingo turns on one leg while balancing a golf ball on our forehead. Like, good job, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris, this has been fantastic. I think you've given people a ton to think about. And if they want to get in contact with you because they do your home mobility test and realize they are in deep trouble, how should they contact you?
Yeah, so we're just Par for Success everywhere. So Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. The website is par the number 4 success.com. And if you guys go to parforsuccess.com/plugged in, we actually have the home assessment there for all the listeners, just as a thanks for listening to the show. And it's totally free for you guys, and hopefully it gives you guys some information of a way to help yourselves and just avoid the turns. That's the takeaway here.
Beautiful. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show.
For sure. Thanks for having me on, Matt.